Hey everybody, Storm and Arm Rumack and Billy the Greek, Georgette Sakis, back in the chair. And we're back with, of course, our esteemed producer, the esteemed FiredUp Network, Mr. Joseph Pasek, here for another, it's close to an hour of entertainment, yelling, screaming, maybe even a few nice compliments, or maybe not. Those are pretty rare.
Hold on. Take it easy. I don't know how to turn down the microphone on my laptop. And you're yelling. And you're yelling. Don't yell, Norm Rumack. Greek's got a headache, and I can't turn down my speakers. God, this is going to be a long hour. Jesus, Murphy. How you doing, folks? I'm Billy the Greek, Storm Norman Rumack. No matter where you're watching, we welcome you. And for those of you that have been watching over the couple of years we've been doing this, rather welcome back. Special thank you to Kosa and Carpets for Life. I'm sure two of your favorite people, Norm.
Oh, yeah. Hey, great folks. Woodbine people, especially, I've known for a long time with the Standardbred Horse Racing Association. They were one of my biggest and most loyal sponsors for my tenure at the Fan 590. And, of course, through you, I met the king of carpets, Nicky. That's the sort of guy, Nicky's the sort of guy you'd like to have a beer with, have a coffee with. Down to earth, easy to talk to, a real gentleman, nice fella, Habs fan, and obviously a loyal sponsor as well. So, yeah, I can't... I have nothing but the greatest to say about both of our sponsors. We're very fortunate and blessed to have them.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think the people at Costa like you?
You're effing right they do. I know they do.
Because
otherwise they wouldn't have sponsored Storm and Norman night at Woodbine for God knows, it was like double-digit years.
Well, let's face it. Let's be honest with one another and the people watching. You historically, you're not the most loved, or you're not the lovable one. Number one, you haven't been the most loved individual historically in terms of your on-air personality. As a matter of fact, hold on, I'm talking here.
Yeah.
So that some people have called you crass. Some people have suggested that you're belligerent to impress. And so again, there's some, I like, me, I love you, Norm, but there's a lot of people that can't stand you.
Yeah, but Billy, that's the whole idea. See, you're talking to the professor, one of the professors, not the only one, of talk radio. What makes talk radio show hosts successful, Billy? I learned this when I was producing at CFRB a year before I went to the Fan. The love-hate index. This is like a scientific formula right out of your chemistry and physics books. If you score high in the love-hate index as a talk show host, you're going to have a big following. That's the only thing I cared about. I didn't care if it was the love or the hate. In fact, the more I heard about the hate, great, because that's my paycheck every couple of weeks. And I scored high, and I always got praise from the higher-ups at the Fan that I scored that high. Right up there with McCown. I scored as high as him in the love-hate index. So there.
Well done. So if that's the case, why did they can your ass?
So they could, I know the real reason. And it had nothing to do with performance. It had to do with, I heard it was probably more in a rumor because I heard it from a Rogers executive, that the money that they saved by cutting me went to somebody else's contract, but I'm not saying who.
Hold on. The money, they were paying you $27 an hour, and they wanted to cut back on your salary.
It was a bit more, but yeah, no, they actually cut back, but I'm not saying who, to protect the identity of the person who they gave the money to. But as opposed to bad economy, blah blah blah, it went to fatten up somebody else's contract. And that's why I got a year's severance, because it had nothing to do with performance, and it was without notice. No notice. Just like, there you go. Here's your package. Have a nice life. I mean, and to be fair, they brought me back 2 years later for another 4 years of freelance work.
Let me ask you a question. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Rumack. What do you think your severance package is going to be with the Greek if you get the boot here?
Well, there better be at least, Billy, a couple of Starbucks second cup certificates. Remember all the mayhem you caused at Second Cup? We could have got arrested.
For some reason, mayhem and trouble seems to follow me. I can't understand why that is.
Yeah, I wonder why.
No matter where I go, there I am, Rumack. So once again, a pleasure to see you. Let's kick things off. Actually, this week we got the Costa Classic coming up. We're very excited for that, as always. Best minute and 50 seconds in the sporting industry. Well, one of my favorites anyway. We're going to have another beautiful race from years gone by. But I guess off the top, we were talking last week about the future of one Alek Manoah. And and it's interesting because we do obviously the show on Monday, 6 o'clock. And by the time
next day he got sent down.
Please don't talk when I'm talking.
Okay, boss.
Have a little respect for this guy right here, who by the way is led. Man, wise guy over here. Okay, fine, all right. This guy over here that's led his East Shore Bulldogs to 5 consecutive victories. Big tournament this weekend in Vaughan. The full squad is there looking to roll. Anyways, we'll talk more about that later. Actually, that's all I want to talk about, really. I don't give a rat's ass about anything that's going on, but they do pay us here to put on a semi-decent show. So right off the hop, again, so we're talking about Manoah last week. And about an hour and 15 minutes later, and 2 outs into the first inning, this guy's given up 6 runs, and then a day later he's on a goose to Florida. What do you make of the whole situation? And in your estimation, what's the likelihood that Alek Manoah ever comes back the way we believed he was when he first came up?
Well, I mean, they did do that miracle rebuild, reboosting. None other than, our great late pitcher, Roy Halladay. Remember, now that was much early. How much earlier? That was relatively early in his career when they reconstructed his pitching, his delivery, and all that. So it's probably not fair or accurate or even wise to make a comparison in terms of what might happen with Alek Manoah. And, trying to base that on what the Jays did with Roy Halladay like more than 20 years ago. I mean, it could go either way, but I kind of wonder, Billy, in terms of, with what's going on with Manoah, like as opposed to sending him down to, AA, AAA, it seems, I mean, what they're saying, and I guess we saw it, his confidence is so badly shattered, they don't even want him pitching at a minor league level because it sounds like his psyche, at least in terms of what he does for a living as a pitcher, has been so badly rattled they don't want to even expose him to whatever single A, double A, triple A baseball. That's a pretty tough scenario, and obviously with that, there's no way of knowing, other than a team or a sports psychologist, or even they wouldn't know how long it's going to take for this guy to get A, his confidence, and B, deliver the way he was capable of previously. And no one can predict they're going to be able to do it, or how long it'll take, or how strongly he'll come back. There's nobody on the planet who could predict that.
How do you know? Did you ask me?
Well, I'm asking you and I'm telling you, but go ahead. I'll ask you. There's no way.
Are you asking or telling me, man? Just
I'm telling you.
You're not asking me. So in other words, what am I doing here? You don't think I have any answers? What do you think? I just come on here with my pretty face? I don't have insight into the psyche of human beings, more professional athletes for that matter? Is that what you're suggesting? You're really pushing it, Norman Rumack. But go ahead.
Well, have the Blue Jays called you yet, Billy? That's what I want to know.
If the Blue Jays had any kind of privy to what goes on in the inner workings of this guy's mind, not only would they call me, I'd be the GM of the club, but that's a different story. Whatever the case is, here's the problem with Manoah. Manoah is like, Manoah is like, in some kind of ways, it's like this. He's been sent, it's like an alcoholic or an addict, and bear with me while I make this comparison, that are losing their grip a little bit. So Manoah has been sent away. It's like kind of a treatment center, kind of sent away from everything, baseball, everything completely. And he needs, much like a treatment center, I've never been, but here's what I hear. Like they need a minimum of 30, 60 days just to get away from everything, just to heal their bodies and reconstruct their psyche. For Manoah, it's 2 things. First of all, it's between the ears. I told you that last week. But also the fact is, too, that this guy's not in peak condition. And maybe it's catching up to him, right? The combination of your mind and your body not at 100% and then your confidence shattered needs for you requires for you to go away. Holiday was a different story. Holiday went away because of his mechanics and because they wanted to reconfigure his it was never about Holiday between the years. It was reconfiguring Holiday's delivery, and that's why he came up. He went down there like as a guy that came from here, and he came back from as somebody else. So that was a mechanical issue. The comparison that I'd make at this point in time would be to Ricky Romero, who never found it. And remember, Romero signed a big contract. For the first couple of years with the Jay-Z was lights out, and then all of a sudden he lost it. And it's eerily similar to me. Like about 2-3 months ago, I said after 3 starts, I said that this reminds me of Romero, but I said it tongue in cheek, somewhat facetiously, as kind of like ha ha he. And then lo and behold, months later, it actually has become a Ricky Romero 2.0. And again, it's so difficult to kind of pinpoint what the future looks like for him, right? Because here's the first thing also that, and many of the guys that have chimed in also have suggested Manoah rushed to the big leagues, never had a failure of this kind in his life, right? He's never been this bad at anything he's ever done for this long in his life. So how do you handle adversity? How do you bounce back? And really, at the end of the day, Norm, I'll ask you this. It's how do you create in a man the ability for them to have amnesia? Understand? You know, I'm going to take you there. So if Manoah didn't remember what he did for the last month and a half, he's Alek Manoah again. So the question is, how do you clear his head? How do you clear his head and start him off fresh again, right? And then when you start him off fresh, will he crash?
Yeah, but Billy, to your point, isn't that, I mean, I when I was at the Fan, I had a chance to speak to all kinds of pitching coaches with a lot of teams, right? And one of the benchmarks of pitching is just major league level, even the minor leagues, is that ability to quickly put behind what just transpired. Like you said, you got to have well, Billy, it's no different than a goalkeeper in the National Hockey League. If you don't have a short memory as a goalkeeper in the air, maybe even quarterback in the NFL, you got picked, the pick 6. If you're going to dwell on that or what the fans are saying to you and the booing, you ain't going to make it. And if you do, you're not going to last very long. So I would think Manoah should have or did have that skill to quickly forget about the previous pitch. But evidently that ability got shattered. And you'd have to think he was probably like, I shouldn't say, I'm not a psychologist, but he was probably thinking about, I was going to use the word obsessing, but that wouldn't be fair. I don't know that. But it sounds like his mind was, not on his next pitch by just looking at the magnitude of his struggles.
Look, it's like anything else, Norman, whether it be on a mound or with a golf club or whatever the case may be, right? If you lose confidence and you doubt yourself continuously, and the results keep accumulating in a negative fashion, then and only then do you find, like off the top of my head, there was about 2-3 years there where Jordan Spieth, one of the greatest golfers in the world, there were questions of whether he would ever come back. Like he went through 2-3 years where his game just fell apart. It fell off the map. He went from the number 1 ranked player in the world to being outside the top 200 for a couple years, and he found it. But the question, we don't know enough about Manoah to know if he is one of those characters, if he is a generational guy that can find it. We just don't know. He burst on the scene, lights out, Yankee Stadium, came up with a blaze and never looked back, right? So it'll be interesting to see when and if he comes back. And again, there's debate on whether that's going to be this year or have we seen the last of Manoah for the calendar year? I don't know. But at this point in time, it's a difficult situation, not only for the Blue Jays, but for Manoah himself, right? If you told me at the beginning of the year that Alek Manoah would be 1-7 and an ERA north of 6, and he'd be sent to Florida by the early parts of June, I'd have told you go have another sip, Rumack, right? But again, that's where you don't know in the world of sports. Guys can lose it pretty easily, right? And that's why again, that's the fascination with the best version of reality TV. Is you don't know what the next scene's going to be like, and we got no idea what it's going to be with Manoa.
Well,
Anyway, hold on. That's enough from you, Rumack. I'm talking.
Yeah.
I'm talking here to the people. You know, I'm a man of the people, right? People want to hear what I have to say.
I didn't know that. I didn't know, but I really didn't know that. But thanks for letting me know.
So I've been told, Mr. Rumack, that I am a profound individual. So with that being said, here's the best 2 minutes of this show, right? And it's definitely not you, man. Let's watch this week's Costa Classic, and we'll see you folks on the other side. Get a little bit of.
Gate swings into the backstretch for the final of the North America Cup, the inaugural edition. And there they go. They're off and pacing. Longfellow, legal notice. Walton Hanover from the outside is going for the lead. Walton Hanover, Longfellow, legal notice. Ideal Zeke is fourth at the rail, fifth. As they go to the turn, Embrace Me, sixth. Down along the inside, Farmstead's Fame. And Ideal Zeke and Embrace Me are both off stride. So we have three horses contending at this point with 6 lengths on the remainder of the field. Around the turn, Walton Hanover on the outside. Here comes Legal Notice to challenge. Longfellow third, quarter of a mile in 28 and 3. Way back there in fourth, Embrace Me back on the pace. Farmstead's Fame is fifth. Sixth is Guts. Seventh, Roman Lover racing in eighth. Manners Swift and Ideal Zeke is ninth. Legal Notice leads. Walton Hanover is right there second. Third, Longfellow. Fourth as they go to the half-mile mark, Embrace Me. Fifth down along the rail, Farmstead's Fame. Sixth, Guts. Seventh, Roman Lover on the outside. Manners Swift is eighth and Ideal Zeke ninth. Half a mile in 57 and 4. Legal Notice leading. Walton Hanover second. Racing third, Longfellow. Fourth, Embrace Me. Fifth, Farmstead's Fame beginning to move on the outside. Sixth, Guts. Seventh on the rail as they go down the back stretch. Manners Swift. Eighth on the outside, Roman Lover. Farmstead's Fame moving up. The leader is Legal Notice. Walton Hanover second. Third to the outside now, Longfellow. Fourth, Embrace Me. Farmstead's Fame is fifth. Guts is sixth. Seventh on the rail, Manners Swift. Roman Lover is eighth. Legal Notice blazes by 3/4 in 1:27. Walton Hanover second. Third on the rail as they come around to turn Longfellow, and Farmstead's Fame is beginning to pick up ground as Longfellow comes out for the stretch drive. Walton Hanover is out. Legal Notice under a drive. Walton Hanover closing at him. Longfellow on the outside. Legal Notice staying game. Walton Hanover trying him. Longfellow with a bold move is closing in. Legal Notice, Walton Hanover. Legal Notice holding on.
By now, you know the name COSA TV, an industry leader producing unique, high-quality digital content promoting harness racing in Ontario. Features, virtual programming, live events, and more. COSA TV has it covered. Follow our social media channels and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page to view the latest content. And if you're looking to bet your favorite Ontario track, check out hpibet.com. COSA TV, taking on.
Billy, how are you? Thanks to our good friends at COSA and Standardbred Horse Racing Association of Ontario, and to Nikki, the king of carpets, as we continue.
Now, hold on. Not only the king of carpets, too, but avid NFL fan. So Nicky Borsch and the Greek have teamed up together. So every Sunday, as you know, probably one of the best football prognosticators in North America, yours truly. What a surprise that is. So I'm going to be working with Nick Borsch every Sunday coming up in the NFL. my free previews, Norm Rumack, hitting at a 67% clip over the last 3+ years, will be brought to you by Nick Borsch at Carpets for Life. So for those of you that I got a lot of friends, Norm, but a lot of them don't really give a rat's ass about watching this program, about anything else, but they sure as hell flock together when the NFL season comes on. My phone doesn't stop ringing, especially if I come up with a hot start and put money in people's pockets. That's a great way to make friends.
Well, just remind them, Billy, that I nailed the exact spread on the Super Bowl last year. So just let them know, okay? In case they weren't watching that particular show, the Super Bowl preview. And I just thought I'd mention that. But, as we continue on. So I'm just curious, Billy. We're almost. We're 3 weeks away from the All-Star break. So, usually, Billy, I know you're a stats guy, right? They say, now it doesn't apply in all cases, in terms of the standings, the line of thinking is quite often the standings at the end of the season are pretty close to what they were at the All-Star break. But we saw Alex Anthopoulos with his Blue Jays the year that, when they got in the playoffs, 2015, they kind of broke the mold. Tampa Bay did it in 2008 also, when they got the World Series, but lost in the championship. But nonetheless, it sometimes happens that a team goes way up or has a big slip up, but usually they're quite similar. Do you expect this year to be a whole lot different, Billy, at the end in terms of the standings, the way they will be at the All-Star break?
Well, the first answer your litany of questions. Holy geez, hold on, I'm just doing a little something here.
Yeah.
Just about 100 questions there. The thing with Alex Anthopoulos, obviously, is sometimes you're way better than your record indicates. Like at that time, they were 48-52 going in the All-Star break, if memory serves. But they had a plus 150 run differential, if you can believe that, in the first, or somewhere over 100, anyways, in terms of to the good side, in terms of a run differential at that time. So obviously, that club was capable of playing much better than their record. When you take a look at the 37-30 Toronto Blue Jays, in my estimation, they are, listen to this, you'll like this, the 37-30 Toronto Blue Jays. I think where their record is an exact indication of the kind of club that they have. For me, it's a club that is anywhere from the, depending on how September goes, anywhere from the mid-80s to the very low 90s. And that's exactly what we've seen to this point in time. We've seen obviously we talked about Mano, we've seen an uneven bullpen at times, and we've seen some offensive struggles, and we've seen a combination of things. So again, Toronto is exactly where they should be in terms of their wins and losses. And moving forward, I haven't seen anything. So if I'm the GM at this point in time, where do I begin? I haven't seen anything from this club that gives me great hope that they can turn a second half of the season and go 52-28 or 53-30. I haven't seen that. So if you don't see that as a manager, as a general manager, then at that point in time, you don't double and triple down. And even if you wanted to double and triple down, your cupboards are bare. You have no prospects really to deal with or to speak of. And if you did, you wouldn't send a guy in Bowden to take Manoa's spot from the minor leagues. You have nobody there. And it's funny that I keep calling them Shatkins. Atkins and Shapiro were vehement in their criticism, rather, of the Greek Alex Anthopoulos, suggesting that he left the cupboard bare after the 2016 playoff run. And it's funny, these guys, 6 years later, look at your own cupboard. It's even worse than it was with Alex. And at least Alex put a decent club together. You guys have annihilated the farm system. There's absolutely nothing there. And you're 37-30. You decided again in your infinite wisdom that Dalton Varsho was worth both Lourdes Gurriel and your catcher for the next 10 years in Moreno. Great. You got the third best player in that trade. And this is not from me. This is from reputable baseball people that I happen to have contact with, seeing as I'm in the community. And except for one guy that's up north, there's a consensus that the Blue Jays got completely fleeced in that deal. So I'm asking you, Norm, by all accounts, if Moreno's a top 5 major league prospect in the game, by Baseball America, by anyone who does these things for a living had Moreno as a top 5 guy. Ask me this or answer me this. Why did Corbin Carroll, who's tearing things up in Arizona, another top 5 prospect, come the other way in that trade? Why was it Dalton Varsho? And why Lourdes Gurriel on top? To me, if you're looking back and you can make sense of that trade to begin with and tell me, just off the back of that trade alone, the Blue Jays got better, then.
Well, no. I mean, their performance, the bottom line is you are who your record says you are, right? You were just talking about that before I even brought up this topic. And that's who they are. And I think I mentioned it briefly last week, Billy, with the fellas they traded. Now, I looked at it a little bit differently than you. You thought maybe it had to do with cultural background. But I would focus more on, their characteristics, personality in the clubhouse. And maybe what they brought to the clubhouse.
Hold on. How do you know what's going on in the clubhouse? Were you there?
No, I don't. No, I don't. But what I'm just looking at, though, Billy, is I'm wondering, I don't know, but isn't it fair to wonder if some of the personality, some of the locker room chemistry has been damaged by those moves? Isn't that a fair question to ask?
Absolutely. It's a fair question to ask, but here's the obvious. And again, let's forget about culture. Let's forget about this. Here's the obvious. A lot of baseball guys were turned off completely by the antics of Teo Hernandez, the home run jacket, the sunflower seeds. You see Lourdes Gurriel making milkshakes on the bench. And a lot of guys that are traditionalists and love the game of baseball look at that behavior and automatically assume it's detrimental to clubhouse character. It's detrimental to the game of baseball. It's an embarrassment. And guys, professional baseball guys shouldn't conduct themselves in that fashion. Whether you agree or not, that was the consensus of a lot of people. That and the fact that Lourdes Gurriel and Teo Hernandez, by all admission, including my own, were not the smartest of baseball players in terms of their baseball instincts, defensive metrics, some of the base running gaps. But you cannot look at that Blue Jay dugout last year and tell me that they weren't enjoying each other. They weren't having fun. You can't tell me that Blue Jay team at the end of the year wasn't firing on all cylinders. And you can't tell me that Blue Jay team last year had Whit Merrifield as your number 5 hitter. Kirk, you look down the list, and your offense, although I understand the numbers are different because the Blue Jays struggled first half of last year, just in the eye test, the Blue Jay offense, once feared in the American League, is pedestrian at best, doesn't strike fear, has not produced well in the Rogers Center in the first half of the season, and is part and parcel of the reason that club is 37-30. If you take a look at the starting rotation, the pitchers have done their job. The bullpen hasn't been the greatest, but it's coming around. So the defense is better. So why are you only 37-30 aside from Alek Manoah being 1-7? Why? And that's because the balance of your lineup, you sent out a 300 hitter in Lourdes Gurriel. Say what you want about him. That guy hits 280 out of his sleep. Teo Hernandez, sure, he strikes out 200 times, but he's a threat behind Guerrero. He's a threat. Just his name on the back of the jersey is a threat. I don't care if he strikes out 200 times. I don't care if he's batting 7th in Seattle. You saw a Blue Jay lineup that had those guys in there, and they were scoring double digits a game last year and the year before. But you decided to get rid of them because it wasn't anything more than you wanted to change culture. That's it. These were not baseball trades, right? And you could have got just as easily, just as good, in my estimation, Kevin Kiermaier from all the guys that come in. So I ask you a question. To this point in time, who's the better player, Kevin Kiermaier or Dalton Varsho?
Well, Kiermaier's been one of the best this year.
Right. So Kiermaier you got for $8 million. You didn't give nothing. And Varsho, you gave in my estimation, which can turn out to be Yadi Molina 2.0 in 15 years. Yeah, I said it. And you gave up a guy that hits 300 in his sleep. And the best player that you brought in was Kevin Kiermaier as a free agent. How in the blue hell? Like, I lose my mind when I listen to these guys, these puppets from Rogers. And some guys up north in I'm not going to mention, I love them. I love the guy I'm talking about. You know who it is. Hold on. Don't interrupt me. Oh, jeez, man. Oh, jeez. I'm talking. This guy just stopped. Listen. Oh, man. You know what? I'm getting a little fed up, Norm Rumack. You're making that great one. loses train of thought. So
Wait, you can't steal. You can't rip off Gretzky's name. Come on, that's blasphemous.
All right, blasphemy. Here's how I feel about that old rookie sensation that I keep talking about. One of my dear friends. As a matter of fact, I went so far out of my way after a victory at the historical Kinsman Park, where the East Shore Bulldogs walked into Kinsman and beat the heavily favored Oshawa, whatever they call them, Legionnaires, 3-1. So what I decided to do, listen to this, out of the goodness of my heart, is I took the old lefty to Arby's, Norm Rumack, and and you know what? Right out of my pocket, man. It cost me $22, and I'll tell you this, and we don't like to promote stuff, but if you've ever been to Arby's, you pay $20, and they give you this little corned beef sandwich. It's like, I could have ate 10 of them, and I'm looking at Marty Roberts, and I just said, geez, man, like, well, he got me again. Like, $23. That's a big hit for a guy like me, Rumack.
Well, how much beef was in that sandwich, Billy, for all that coin?
I could have ate 8 of them, man. So what I'm telling you, and maybe somebody will chime in at some point in the future, either in a direct message or on there, whatever the case is. Who the hell goes to Arby's, man? It's just a worst of all time. You ever go somewhere and you eat, you pay a decent dollar, and you're left starving when you get home? Like half an hour later, I could have eaten 10 of those. Anyways, so the point of the matter is, even a guy that's baseball savvy in Marty, and there's a lot of other guys like him, really in their hearts believe the Blue Jays got better this offseason. Sure, why wouldn't they think so? Rogers told you that. Shai Davidi told you that. Ben Nicholson-Smith told you that. Every puppet they have on Rogers told you how much better they got. They even fooled the guys on the Baseball Network, talking about the best offseason belonging to the Toronto Blue Jays. And I'm watching this the whole time while it's occurring, and I'm wondering, what the hell are these guys talking about? What are they thinking? And obviously, 2 months later, you got Gurriel in Arizona batting third, hitting .330, leading the team in home runs and RBIs, on a pace to hit 25 and 100. You got Moreno catching decently, batting .280. And you got Hernandez that's got just as good power numbers as Guerrero. And the only guy that came in was Varsho. Okay, you got better. Great. You didn't get better. You got rid of certain guys.
All right. So, Billy, let's project to the end of the season. Let's say your prediction is spot on, that the Jays, at the end of the year, are exactly the Jays we're seeing right now. You know, finishing, I don't know, maybe third, fourth, you know, somewhere around there. Depends, you know, do the Yankees run into injuries? Tampa Bay hasn't really had any drop-off to speak of. That's pretty remarkable. And Baltimore is that same, but even better, exciting team we saw last year step up, and they're stepping up even more. So it's not, and as we talked about, another important factor for the Blue Jays trying to climb the ladder, Billy, they don't see the Rays and the Yankees till what? The last 6 weeks of the season, right?
Which it can be good or bad, depending. Obviously, the schedule is very favorable coming out of the All-Star break. You got about a 30-game stretch where you play in a collection of bottom feeders in the revamped system, where you play every team the same number of times. So that's an advantage in that way. And given the fact that you play the teams ahead of you, like in some respects, you control your own destiny. Although in baseball, it's hard to go beat another team 5-6 times in a row, right? It's extremely difficult. Stuff like that doesn't happen, especially when the other team is better than you on paper. Like when we're talking about the Yankees and even the Rays to a lesser extent, they got more talent and better players than the Blue Jays. So how are you going to beat them 5-6 times in a row? And again, I'm very discouraged in terms of, not discouraged necessarily in terms of the performance. I'm very discouraged in terms of the level of brains, or whatever you want to call it, in the collection of Blue Jay fans that bought the hook, line, and sinker on the Shatkins Kool-Aid. And that's the most disappointing thing for me. And again, these guys are never held accountable. Whereas Alex Anthopoulos, you lost your job. The guy, he went on to win a World Series. We've had him on this show before, great Greek guy. And he went on to win a World Series, and they ran him out of town. Meanwhile, these guys here, right, these two guys have not done anything of substance. Last year in the trade deadline, you didn't address your bullpen. If you did, you might have beat Seattle. You got rid of everybody that kind of you thought was the problem. And you know what? Here's what I'm beginning to. When you don't realize who the problem is, Norm, you know what the truth is. Usually it's you, and that's Atkins and Shapiro.
All right. So let's say at the end of the year, as we were saying, so the standings are pretty close to what they are now for the Toronto Blue Jays. So do you think in any circumstance, the likes of Shapiro and Atkins, based on, Gurriel, Teoscar, moves like that, do they pay a price, or is like they too far up the organization and too well, ingrained with the Rogers higher ups to pay a price?
Well, you have to factor in that this is a business and a multi-billion dollar operation. So when you're factoring in that, you also have to factor in the off the field stuff. Like Shapiro obviously took the lead in revamping Rogers Center. I'm sure the people down at headquarters, when they get a few extra 20s, are pretty happy with Shapiro in terms of some of the moves he's made, how he's negotiated them and all that stuff behind closed scenes. We don't know. So they're probably happy with Shapiro. Now the question is, and Shapiro and Atkins are best buddies. They're almost like Sheldon Keefe and Kyle Dubas, right? That's it. That's exactly who they are. So how in the blue hell is one buddy going to fire the other? Right? How is one buddy going to fire the other? So the first guy that's going to have to go, obviously, is Atkins at this point in time. And then you ask yourself questions from there. Like, you brought in Don Mattingly. Did you bring him in kind of like with the idea that he's waiting in the wings? Obviously, we were told not. But you can't help but wonder if you're somewhere in that dugout and you're watching Mattingly every day, and if you're Schneider, you can't help but wonder if you're not doing what you should, and you look over and there's a Hall of Famer there, and he's managed before, sometimes successfully, especially in latter parts in Miami. You gotta ask yourself, like, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time you cut the bait. You cut it on the little guy, the little general. And for me, Schneider, especially with that idiotic move to go to the mountain 2 times that you don't even see a peewee. You don't even see a. I asked Bobby Nelson, good friend of mine, former director of player personnel for the Blue Jays. I'm a name dropper. We talk all the time. He's a big fan of the Greek. Thinks I'm probably one of the best. He calls me a hidden gem for whatever it's worth in terms of the baseball world, but whatever the case is, we'll just leave that between me and him. He tells me the exact same thing. When you do stuff like that, you have 15 coaches automatically in that dugout. They look at you and you lose credibility. There's certain things that you can't do, and that was one of them. The way he handles some of his press conferences, the way he handles his bullpen, and again, the Schneider grade is the Schneider persona. Like, you see him, he looks like a ball manager. He's probably a good guy too, but the Schneider grade is not that great, Norm Rumack. It's not that great. It's closer to a C- than a C+. Well,
I kind of here. I'll ask you this, just from your East York perspective. When a manager has a major brain cramp like that, and it's pretty rare. I mean, who else has done that in Major League Baseball that you can recall? Never. Okay.
I asked a whole slew of guys that go back in the game to World War II. Some of them. Shout out to Jim Lennon, who doesn't know what a computer is, out in Oshawa. He's been running Oshawa baseball for the better part of 60, 70 years. He's been a fixture out in Oshawa. Shout out to Jim Lennon and my good friend Howie Burney, who's done the same in the TBA out of Leaside. They've been around since the 50s, and nobody's seen this. Nobody can remember a guy going out 2 times and forgetting he came out. And I asked them, do you remember this in the bigs? And they said, no, absolutely not. I go, do you remember a peewee coach doing it? And they said, no. What has happened is they've taken wrong lineup cards or that stuff happens. But to go out a second time, they've never seen it before.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up or extrapolate a little bit. You're talking about how the coaches on the bench would quietly, what did I just see? Let me ask you, your best guess. It's only a guess. Let's take the franchise. Vladimir Guerrero sees that. What do you think he and Bichette, for example, are thinking when they watch that?
I don't know what they're thinking, but I would guess, like, when they're walking home or they're having a cold one or on the phone, they're texting. They're probably saying, holy, our manager's a tool. Like, what the hell are we doing here? That's what I'm getting. I hope none of, see, here's what I say. I say this because I have a 30 man roster, and there's a personal team chat that we have that I'm not a part of. They asked me to be a part of it, but I said, no, I wanted them to have their own space. I didn't want to know what they said. So I hope they're not talking about me the same way. But when you make egregious mistakes like that, especially when you're the skipper, right? And you make mistakes like that, it matters, man. Automatically, people look at you different. Your credibility is a little bit shaken. I don't know how we handled that in the clubhouse. I don't know if because there's a way where obviously.
Oh, okay. Well, Billy, we got to get him back for that punchline. I'm sure he'll log back in. Oh, there you go. Okay, sorry, Billy.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Got to put the AC on, man. A little slow down a sec, Rumack. Let me get a little. It's been half an hour, man. I lost my mind. I was wondering why I didn't feel so good. Hold on.
Okay.
Sometimes that's the best thing for a little sinus, man. Get a little nicotine in you, man, and you're good to go. So, anyways, here's what we might not understand. People are also forgiving, depending on how Schneider handled that, how he addressed the team. Like, the team can look past that. One isolated move is not going to lose you forever. It lost you for a moment. No doubt about that. But what could it lose you for a season? That depends if it's compounded by other things like not taking accountability. Like at the press conference, he said, yeah, I made a mistake. Oh, but it was the right move. To me, that was a bad answer right there. You just say, I shit the bed, period, case closed. I'm a big league manager. I get paid good money, and I got to be better than that. I'm an idiot. I'm an ass. And if I do something like that, instead of you guys firing me, I should resign. That's unacceptable. I love my team, and I'll be better. Bam. And they'll say, all right, Skip, thank you. But if you come out and you say, well, yeah, it was the right move anyway, they look at you and say, not only are you a clown, but you don't know you're not accountable either, right? You understand? Words are very powerful, Rumack. And believe it, man, this guy over here's got 1,000. That's why, maybe even more than 1,000 words, and some big syllable ones too, man. Multiple syllable phrases for inspirational purposes. Delivered.
So
hold on, I'm talking. Delivered ad nauseum.
Billy, I'm pleased to know that you're a multi-syllabic guy. This is very. I'm proud to say I know you now. I know that you're multi-syllabic in your composition.
I'll tell you this. This guy right over here and his vernacs. You know the vernacular right here.
Yeah.
It's, you know what? It's second to none. It's second to none. Like, I talk to myself all the time, man, and I use some big words when I'm talking to myself, and I prove it to myself every day on this couch, man, that my vocabulary is, I don't even know how to answer that. It's impressive. It's impressive. Like Marty Roberts' hair.
What? Billy, you shouldn't pick on poor Marty all the time. He's a nice guy.
I told you, I bought him the Arby's, and now that gives me free reign to attack him for 6 months. That was the deal.
That better have been a damn good sandwich, Billy.
For Marty, it better have been, man. His fat ass woofed it down in no time, man. Boy, that guy can eat, man. Take a look at him, man. 5'11", 280 pounds, man. Jesus to Murphy, man. You stay away from Arby's.
So let me run this by you about the Blue Jays and the clubhouse, the players. You mentioned, okay, you're right. The players, they see a manager, a brain cramp, brain fart, whatever you want to call it. It's like, if he owns it completely, like you said, which he should have. Hey, I screwed up. Inexcusable, can't happen to the major league level. It better not happen again for me. Otherwise, maybe I should. Like, you're right. If you humble yourself, fall on your sword, figuratively speaking, I think the players respect the fact that, hey, he effed up, but he owned it, and he didn't make any excuses. Okay, cool. Everybody can have a brain cramp. Well, you talk about the Blue Jays. Some of those plays in the outfield last year are just missing easy pop flies or collisions, right? Things that shouldn't happen. Okay, so as long as the players own it. And usually they do after a game. You'll see pitchers do that all the time. That's fine, all right? But I kind of wonder, so between now questionable offseason moves with player personnel and then a managerial brain cramp, I kind of wonder, I have no way of knowing because, again, I don't have media access anymore. And even if I did, I don't think we'd know. Do you think all these things combined can affect clubhouse morale with Vladdy, Bichette, the rest of the crew of the pitch? Do you think it's like they say, do they ever think to themselves, what's going on here already?
Sometimes here's the funny thing, where you looked at it not in the individual aspects, but as a collective. And you look in the mirror, you look at the guys around you, you look at your skipper, you look at your farm system, you look at your GM, right? Guys are smart. Guys that play the game, like, they're smart, and they just look in the mirror, and you know what they say, Norm? We're just not good enough. We are. Yeah. And if you get into that place and you really believe, and you look in the mirror and you don't believe that you're good enough, man, that's the worst thing that you can have in a clubhouse. And the Blue Jays, if they're realistic with themselves and they look around the majors, look around their own division, at this point in time, they are just not good enough to compete on a championship level. They're a team that's a decent club, and everything breaks right. Maybe contend for a wild card spot come September, but they are not as constructed a elite team. And furthermore, they cannot be an elite team because they can't go out and get anybody to make them an elite team. There's players out there. If you wanted to get better, there's a lot of terrible teams with a lot of good players. You can go out and get them. But when the Blue Jays come calling, what are you going to give? There's nothing. The only guy that's worth a salt as a prospect, there's a couple guys, Tiedemann, but you're holding on to him with your dear life, man. That guy's your future, right? One move is not going to be enough for the Blue Jays to supersede some of the better clubs in baseball. So you need a collection of moves. You need an Anthopoulos to bring in Price, to bring in Tulo, to bring in Revere, to bring in core pieces. Right? You need a 5-hitter. You need a guy to protect the Guerrero. It's not a surprise Guerrero's got 9 home runs and 35 RBIs because the guy behind him doesn't warrant the respect. The guy behind him, even Chapman, had a great start to the season, hitting in front of Guerrero for the most part, doesn't warrant the respect. If I'm a pitcher, right, Norm, and you're looking at me and Vladimir Guerrero's at the plate and Dalton Varshall's behind him, how the hell am I going to pitch to Guerrero and challenge him when I know the guy behind him is half the man he is? It just doesn't happen. And then here's what becomes worse. Guerrero knows this too, and he presses. You understand? So the combination of him not getting pitches and the guy behind him makes him press. And when you press in baseball, especially as a hitter, that's the worst place you can be. And that's where he finds himself. You put a legitimate stud behind him, you'll see Guerrero's numbers take off through the roof, man. And I told you so. But those legitimate guys are few and far between. They're nowhere to be found, and they won't be wearing a Toronto Blue Jay uniform this year. Let's move on from these guys. Enough's enough. Obviously, we're at the tail end of the NHL Finals. Probably it's a fait. Do you know? I'll speak a little French for you. Maybe you'll know.
A fait accompli. A fait accompli. Is that what you're going to say?
What are you, Kreskin? You read minds too? All right.
Yeah.
So obviously Florida down 3-1. Tough loss in game 4. Great hockey game, especially in the third period. Florida's coming hard. Now, when I first saw this Florida team, even when they were down in Boston 3-1, I still had the belief that Florida, if they can steal a game, they can come back and win the series. I don't have that belief anymore. Do you?
Well, no. I mean, Vegas is just too resilient and too good, and they have Stanley Cup final experience, right? So there's not seemingly anything missing. I still can see Florida winning a couple of games, but I can't see Vegas not winning another game. I just think they're, and that's no disrespect, and just for a moment set aside my friendship with Rick Dudley, but even if Rick wasn't involved, I'd be saying, Florida, even if it ends, they'll have one win. So it's wrapped up in 5. They can be very proud for what they did. I mean, look at the teams they knocked off. They didn't knock off, easy pickings, right? They had a hell of a playoff run, and it's something they can build on. And I guarantee in a market where they haven't had much to cheer about, really, since their last Stanley Cup appearance in 1996, that's something that can sell you tickets. I know it's snowbirds who go in to see Panther games, but you can't blame Floridians for not flocking to Panther games when they've only been how often they've been in the playoffs. And by the way, people have a smug attitude about Toronto. I'm sorry. I was at Raptor games, in the post-Vince era when it was like, Chris Bosh, okay? But they weren't very good. There wasn't much expectation. And quite frankly, a lot of nights, the Air Canada Center, Scotiabank, or whatever you want to call it, was one half to sometimes 2/3 empty. You'd say, like, you get any seat you want in the lower bowl. And when the Blue Jays, the end of the Roy Halladay era, they were down. I know for a fact they were down about 3,000, 4,000 season ticket holders. So outside of the Leafs, nobody should get too smug that, Toronto supports their teams win or lose. No, they don't. They support the Maple Leafs win or lose. Everybody else, if the Raptors, Blue Jays are like hitting bottom or rock bottom, or they're just not very competitive, bye-bye. You'll see lots of empty seats and you have your choice. So Toronto isn't any different than Florida, I'm sorry, other than the Maple Leafs. And that's mostly corporate seats, by the way, because they're the only ones in Florida.
Fair enough. But when you're talking about the culture and the fandom in Toronto, as opposed to, maybe that's a bad example, because there is a difference. Obviously, when you take a look at the numbers, sure, they depreciate in Toronto, but we're talking about Miami. Obviously, warm weather. There's a lot of things to do there. Yeah. A whole different. There's so many social aspects that come into that, right? It's just not about fans and hockey. There's a lot of things to do there. But when you're talking about Miami, Tampa Bay, and those kind of areas, the market is very challenging. And again, if you're bad there, even if you're good, you have a tough time. That's the difference. Tampa Bay, even when Tampa Bay is good, and they've been good for 10 years, they can't draw. I know the stadium's terrible. Miami, the same way. Even when they're good, they can't fill that stadium. So there is an issue where if you can't compare Florida fans and Toronto fans, even in any kind of way. Maybe the NBA, yes, because the NBA is more culturally ingrained in Miami. That's a good comparison. But when it comes to other sports, Florida's not that great of a sports town. Here's what I will tell you: is this sets Florida losing in the finals sets yet another precedent. If you're not aware, let me bring you up to speed. This will be maybe the third time within the last 5 years that the team that has ended up as the second best team in the Stanley Cup playoffs had one thing in common, Norman. They beat our Marty's Toronto Maple Leafs. Does that in any way, again, I don't know if this is a coincidence or what have you, does that in any way change the way the Leafs look at their franchise, given the fact that the team that beat them went on to the Stanley Cup Finals?
No, because it didn't make any difference the last couple of years. Didn't make any difference when Montreal went to the finals. Didn't make any difference last year pertaining to Tampa Bay. There's no record of proof that shows, we lost to a pretty good team. Gee, look how much better we are.
Hold on.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, they got knocked off in the second round in 5 games. Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
But can you, if you're a Leaf fan, an optimistic one that wants to give the core 4 another chance, as citing the Ovechkin, citing Yzerman, citing the pain it takes to win, even though this pain's been an elongated process, upwards of 7 years. Is there anything to be said to the guy that says, wait a minute, Florida's in the Stanley Cup, Vegas is there, so arguably we're the third best team in the world? Is that not a fair comment?
No. Not pardon my line, not a chance in hell, Billy. You can bank anything on that. And for some reason, now look at, the Vegas people like your own, they're your brothers and sisters and all that kind of stuff, right? It's like, why is it, if I'm not mistaken, that this past fall, did they have the Leafs as the Stanley Cup favorites in Vegas?
They had the Leafs.
The only reason I can see why they would do that is because Toronto fans, Vegas is picking them, I'm going to lay some money down. That's the only rational reason why they should be picking the Leafs as Stanley Cup favorites. Nothing on the ice even comes close. It's a joke.
Hold on. Leaf fans did not make Toronto after Boston was eliminated. Toronto became the Stanley Cup odds-on favorites. Leaf fans didn't do this, Norm. It was
what I'm asking is, do they put down money when they see that? That's what I'm asking.
It doesn't matter if they put down money. Pundits, Vegas pundits, who know more than me and you put together, had, in their estimation, had the Toronto Maple Leafs after Boston was eliminated as the Stanley Cup favorites.
They've made the same mistake 3 years in a row. When are they going to wake up?
Well, they also had the Blue Jays after the Jose Reyes trade as favorites to win the AL East, and the Blue Jays won 68 games that year. That season, if you remember, another disaster. So obviously Vegas doesn't get it right all of the time. But the issue is, even for them to be favorites suggests that they had somehow a decent enough shot to win. So you lost in 5, you lost in overtime, really tight series. You didn't win again. So at this point in time, you brought in Trey Living. Keefe is kind of, who knows, up in the air. They're not extending him. They don't know if we're going to bring him back. There's a lot of conjecture in Matthews. So if Norm Rumack's sitting back and he's putting the chess pieces together, the number one thing is, if you're Trey Living, do you bring back Sheldon Keefe for another season? And what do you do with Austin Matthews if Austin Matthews says, you know what, the only way I'll sign is without a discount. I want max money for max term. What do you do if you're Trey Living?
Well, I mean, I'd give Austin max money, but the core four, it's time to say bye-bye. You can't have that kind of cash tied up in 4 players any longer. And I don't blame Austin. He should be going for the top contract, okay? I think Connor McDavid is a better all-around player and a more dangerous player, and I think he's been better in the playoffs than Austin was in general. But I'm just saying, Austin, the question you're going to ask, well, okay, if you're not giving him his money and you're going to move him, what are you getting in return to replace him? So you'd have to, if you're Trey Living, explore that before you even talk to Austin. So I wouldn't move him. If I had to, I'd give Austin the money and I'd move Tavares and Nylander to add to the depth and scoring that they need.
Hold on. Okay, smart guy. That's pretty.
I'm saying, I know there's limited movement, trade contracts and all, but that stuff can be dealt with. Okay.
That's a rather wise assessment on your part. Give you credit where credit is due. You know, you're not the borderline Hall of Famer for nothing, but smart guy, Syracuse graduate. Oh, undergraduate. I don't know what you did there. What were you?
Graduate.
Graduate. So in other words, you actually got a piece of paper that says you toughed it out for 4 years?
Well, no, master's degree in science and telecommunications. Thank you.
Master. Okay. Oh, masterful one.
We got to wrap it up, I think, don't we?
2 minutes. Query me this, master.
No. We got about a minute, Billy. Give it to 60 seconds.
Query me this, masterful one. Who in the blue hell is going to take John Tavares and $10 million? I don't know. Tell me. Well, are you going to give that away?
We'll deal with that next week. We got another show coming up. I think our good buddy Tracy Murray is coming up doing some hoops. So thanks to Joe Pasek, Fired Up Network. Billy, a lot of fun as always. Thanks to Kosa and Nikki, the King of Carpets, and thanks to Mr. Pasek for extending our show from the Fired Up Network. Folks, God bless you for watching. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to being with you back next Monday. God bless.